If someone had told me that the man I publicly mocked before thousands of people would be the very one I would one day beg for mercy from, I would have laughed in their face. If someone had told me that the Bible I set on fire during a TikTok live would become the book I would later sleep beside every night, I would have called them insane. But there are moments in life when truth doesn't knock politely. It breaks down every wall you've spent years building. This is not the story of a woman who was looking for Jesus. It is the story of a woman who hated him. Until the day I died. My name is Layla Al-Harbi. I was born and raised in Amman, Jordan, in a family where faith was woven into every part of daily life. I am 38 years old, a widow, and the mother of one beautiful daughter, Yasmin, who had just turned 14 when everything changed. For nearly 17 years, my husband, Omar, was my closest friend, my protector, and the person who made even the hardest seasons of life bearable. We built our lives one small step at a time. We were never rich, but our home was filled with laughter, family dinners, and dreams for our daughter's future. Then, one ordinary afternoon, my world collapsed. Omar suffered a sudden heart attack while meeting a client for work. By the time I reached the hospital, the doctors had already covered him with a white sheet. I still remember pulling it back, hoping they had made a mistake. I kept waiting for his chest to rise one more time. I kept waiting for someone to tell me they had the wrong patient. Instead, all I heard were quiet voices offering condolences that sounded painfully empty. People say time heals grief. They lied. Time didn't heal me. It simply taught me how to carry my pain without letting everyone else see it. Every morning I woke up because I had a daughter who still needed her mother. Every night I cried after she had gone to sleep because I no longer had the man who used to wipe away my tears. Our apartment became unbearably quiet. His coffee cup remained in the kitchen cupboard exactly where he had left it. His prayer rug stayed folded beside our bed because I couldn't bring myself to move it. Sometimes I caught myself listening for his footsteps in the hallway before remembering he was never coming home again. It was Yasmin who finally convinced me to join TikTok. "Mama," she said one evening with a smile I hadn't seen in months. "Just try it, you'll laugh again." I resisted at first. I had always believed social media was little more than people dancing, arguing, and chasing attention. But after weeks of her persistence, I downloaded the app. That was 4 months before the night that changed my life forever. To my surprise, TikTok became my escape. For a few hours every evening, I could forget I was a widow. I watched cooking videos, travel clips, family stories, and live conversations from people all over the world. The endless scrolling gave my mind somewhere to run whenever memories of Omar became too painful. My daughter smiled every time she heard me laugh again, even if it was only because of a stranger's video. Then one afternoon, while cleaning an old guest room, I found something I never expected. Years earlier, Yasmin had been cared for by a gentle Christian nanny from the Philippines named Maria, who had lived with us for almost 3 years before returning home to care for her aging parents. She had left in such a hurry that several of her belongings remained forgotten inside a small wardrobe. Among them was a tiny, worn Bible. Out of curiosity, I opened it. My eyes landed on words about Jesus raising the dead and giving eternal life. Something inside me snapped. I read the verse again, then again. The anger that rushed through me had nothing to do with paper and ink. It came from the deepest wound inside my heart. If this Jesus had power over death, where was he when my husband died? Where was he when my daughter buried her father? Where was he during the endless nights I cried until sunrise? I slammed the Bible shut so hard that dust flew from its pages. To clear my mind, I picked up my phone and opened TikTok, expecting the usual cooking videos and harmless entertainment. Instead, my For You page became something I couldn't explain. The first video was a Christian woman speaking about hope after losing her husband. I scrolled. The next was someone reading from the Bible. I scrolled again. Another testimony, Another scripture. Another preacher talking about Jesus. Every swipe made me angrier. It felt as though the algorithm itself refused to leave me alone. Frustrated beyond reason, I tapped into TikTok Live. At first, I intended only to vent my frustration. Instead, I lost control. Thousands of viewers gathered as I mocked Jesus, insulted Christianity, and shouted words I am deeply ashamed of today. The comments poured in faster than I could read them. Many Muslims applauded me, encouraged me, and filled the screen with messages telling me to keep going. The approval fueled my anger. Then I reached for the little Bible. Without stopping to think, I held it in front of the camera. I struck a match. The flames spread across its pages as thousands watched live. The comment section exploded with applause, cheering, and celebration. When the live stream ended, I smiled to myself. I thought I had won that night. I had no idea my real battle was only beginning.
When I ended the live stream, I expected to feel victorious. Thousands of people had watched me. The comments had been filled with applause, praise, and encouragement. My phone was overflowing with notifications from strangers calling me fearless and congratulating me for standing up for my beliefs. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, the moment I placed my phone on the table, an overwhelming silence settled over the apartment. It wasn't the ordinary silence of a home after midnight. It felt heavy, almost as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. I turned on the television to fill the emptiness, but even the voices coming from the screen couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled over me. That night, Yasmin came into the living room carrying 2 cups of tea. She looked at me for several seconds before speaking. "Mama, are you all right?" she asked quietly. I smiled and told her I was simply tired from being online for too long. She didn't look convinced. Mothers often believe they know when something is wrong with their children, but children can sometimes see through their mothers just as easily. She hugged me before going to bed, and as she walked away, she turned back one last time, as if she wanted to say something else. Instead, she simply whispered, "Good night." I watched her disappear down the hallway, unaware that it would be the last peaceful night either of us would have for a long time. As I began cleaning the living room, I noticed something strange. The smell of burning paper lingered in the air. At first, I assumed it was natural, since I had burned the Bible only an hour earlier. I opened every window in the apartment. I sprayed air freshener into every room. I even mopped the floor and washed the small metal tray where the ashes had fallen. Yet the smell refused to disappear. It wasn't strong enough to make me cough, but it was impossible to ignore. Wherever I walked, it seemed to follow me. I checked the kitchen, convinced I had left something burning on the stove. Everything was off. I checked the electrical outlets, worried there might be faulty wiring. Nothing was wrong. By the time I finally went to bed, the scent of smoke still clung to the air around me. Sleep came quickly, but peace did not. I found myself standing in complete darkness. There were no buildings, no stars, no ground that I could clearly see beneath my feet. It was as if I had stepped into an endless space where nothing existed except silence. Then, from somewhere beyond the darkness, I heard a voice speaking my name. "Layla." It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was gentle. So gentle that it almost sounded familiar. I turned toward the sound, but there was no one there. Again, I heard my name. "Layla?" Every instinct inside me told me to run, yet my feet refused to move. Before I could speak, I suddenly woke up, gasping for air. My heart was pounding so violently that I thought I was having another nightmare within the nightmare. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. The screen read 3:17 a.m. I tried convincing myself it had only been a bad dream. The following night, it happened again. The same darkness, the same silence, the same gentle voice calling my name. Again, I woke at exactly 3:17 a.m. By the 4th night, I stopped checking the time because I already knew what I would see. Every single night, 3:17 a.m. Soon, I became afraid to fall asleep at all. Exhaustion slowly replaced rest. My eyes developed dark circles. My patience disappeared. I stopped enjoying the things that had distracted me only days before. Even TikTok no longer felt entertaining. Every evening I dreaded bedtime because I knew what was waiting for me. During the day, I told myself I was imagining everything, but as night approached, fear quietly settled back into my heart. Then something even more frightening began. One night I opened my eyes and realized I couldn't move. My body was lying on the bed exactly where I had fallen asleep, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't lift my arms or even turn my head. My chest felt unbearably heavy, as though someone had placed a massive stone on top of me. I tried calling for Yasmin, but no sound came out. Panic spread through my body. My breathing became shallow. I fought with every ounce of strength I had just to move a finger. Then I heard the voice again. Only this time, it wasn't calling my name. It was quietly repeating words. Words that sounded strangely familiar. At first, I couldn't understand why they seemed familiar, until I suddenly remembered where I had seen them. They were the very words I had read in that little Bible before I burned it. The same passage about life. The same promise about hope beyond death. The same words that had filled me with anger only days before. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperately trying to block out the voice, but it continued speaking with remarkable calmness. There was no shouting, no accusation, no threats, just those same words, spoken over and over until I finally regained control of my body. When I jumped out of bed, I searched every room of the apartment. No one was there. The doors were locked. The windows were closed. Yasmin was asleep. I stood alone in the darkness, trembling so violently that I could barely remain standing. I told no one. Not my daughter. Not my sisters. Not my closest friends. Who would believe me? After everything I had publicly said on that live stream, I couldn't admit that I was terrified by dreams and voices. I convinced myself I was simply under stress. I blamed grief. I blamed exhaustion. I blamed my own imagination. But the experiences refused to stop. Within weeks, my health began changing. Food lost its taste. I struggled to eat even small meals. I lost weight without trying. My headaches became so severe that bright sunlight made me feel sick. Some mornings I woke already exhausted, as though I hadn't slept at all. My hands occasionally trembled without warning, and I found myself forgetting simple things I had never forgotten before. Finally, Yasmin insisted that I see a doctor. The physician ordered blood tests, heart tests, and neurological examinations. I spent hours moving from one department to another inside the hospital. Every time the results came back, the doctors looked confused. One specialist finally sighed and said, "Physically, there's nothing here that explains what you're describing." Those words should have reassured me. Instead, they frightened me even more. Friends began visiting after hearing I wasn't well. Some believed I was suffering from depression after losing Omar. Others suggested stress. Several encouraged me to pray more faithfully and spend less time on social media. My family arranged for respected religious leaders to visit our home. They recited prayers over me, offered words of encouragement, and reminded me that difficult seasons eventually pass. I appreciated every effort they made, but nothing changed. The nights grew darker. The dreams became clearer. The voice became closer. And with each passing day, I could no longer shake the terrifying feeling that something was drawing nearer. Then, one ordinary afternoon, while preparing lunch with Yasmin in the kitchen, a crushing pain spread across my chest. The room suddenly began spinning. The plate slipped from my hands and shattered against the floor. I tried to call my daughter's name, but the words wouldn't come. My legs gave way beneath me. The last thing I remember was seeing the terror on Yasmin's face as she screamed for help. Then everything went black. The next thing I learned was not from my own memory, but from the doctors and nurses who cared for me afterward. Yasmin later told me that the ambulance arrived within minutes. She never left my side during the ride to the hospital. She kept holding my hand, crying, and repeating, "Mama, please don't leave me too." Those words still break my heart because she had already buried her father. The thought of losing her mother as well was more than a 14-year-old girl should ever have to carry. The emergency room erupted into controlled chaos the moment I arrived. Doctors rushed around my bed, nurses connected monitors and intravenous lines, and voices called out instructions I would later hear described by those who were present. They suspected a serious cardiac event, although my medical history gave no indication that I had ever suffered from heart disease. Then, without warning, my heart stopped. The steady rhythm on the monitor became a single, continuous tone. Someone immediately began chest compressions. Another prepared the defibrillator. I would later be told that the medical team fought desperately to bring me back. Yet, strangely, I felt no fear. In fact, the fear disappeared the very moment my heart stopped. Suddenly, I was looking down at the room from above. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I could clearly see the doctors surrounding my body. I recognized the blue curtain near the entrance to the emergency room and the silver tray holding medical instruments. I saw one nurse wiping tears from Yasmin's face while trying to keep her outside the treatment area. I watched a doctor counting aloud before the electric shock was delivered to my body. Everything below seemed frantic. Everything around me felt perfectly still. I remember thinking, how can I see all of this when my eyes are closed? Before I had time to understand what was happening, the hospital room slowly faded away. The darkness that surrounded me was unlike the frightening darkness from my dreams. This darkness felt peaceful, almost like standing beneath a calm night sky before sunrise. It carried no fear, no loneliness, and no confusion. Then, in the distance, a light began to appear. There are no words capable of describing that light. It wasn't merely bright. It wasn't blinding. It seemed alive. Every step toward it filled me with a peace I had never experienced during my entire life. The grief I had carried since Omar's death suddenly disappeared. The weight that had rested on my shoulders for months simply melted away. Every anxious thought became silent. For the first time since becoming a widow, my heart felt completely whole. Yet alongside that indescribable peace came something else. Conviction. Not condemnation. Not humiliation. Conviction. I somehow understood that nothing about my life was hidden. Every word I had ever spoken, every act of kindness, every lie, every moment of selfishness, every hidden motive, every expression of love, and every expression of hatred was completely known. There was nowhere to hide and nothing to defend. No one accused me. No one listed my failures. I simply knew that truth itself leaves no room for pretending. Almost immediately, one memory rose above all the others. The live stream. I saw myself holding the little Bible. I saw the match. I heard my own voice mocking Jesus. I watched the flames consume the pages while strangers celebrated in the comments. The weight of what I had done settled over me with painful clarity. Until that moment, I had always justified my actions by pointing to my anger and my grief. Standing there, I could no longer hide behind either. I realized that pain had explained my behavior, but it had never excused it. Then I saw him. He was standing a short distance away. The light surrounded him without coming from behind him. It was as though the light belonged to him. His presence carried both unimaginable authority and indescribable gentleness at the same time. Looking at him, I felt completely known. Every secret, every wound, every fear, every failure, it was all before him. I knew immediately who he was. Jesus. The very name I had spoken with contempt only days earlier now filled me with awe. I expected anger. I expected judgment. I expected him to turn away from me. He did none of those things. Instead, he looked at me with compassion so deep that I cannot compare it to anything I have experienced on earth. For what felt like a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he asked me a question. Layla, why are you carrying so much pain? The question caught me completely off guard. Not, why did you burn the Bible? Not, why did you insult me? Not, why should I forgive you? Instead, why are you carrying so much pain? The moment he asked, everything I had buried inside me came rushing to the surface. I told him about Omar. I told him about watching the doctors cover my husband's face with a white sheet. I confessed how abandoned I had felt. I admitted that every time someone spoke about hope or eternal life, all I could think about was the empty chair at my dining table. I told him I had become angry because I believed God had ignored my prayers. When I finished speaking, he remained silent for a moment. Then he said something I have never forgotten. Your grief was real, Layla, but you allowed grief to become bitterness, and bitterness slowly convinced you that hatred could heal what only love could touch. Those words pierced my heart more deeply than any accusation ever could. He continued speaking with incredible patience, explaining that forgiveness is not pretending evil never happened. Forgiveness is refusing to let evil become the master of your own heart. He told me that mercy is never weakness. It is strength choosing compassion when revenge feels easier. He explained that truth does not fear honest questions, but pride often refuses honest answers. As he spoke, I realized that he was not trying to win an argument. He was healing a wound. Then he said something that broke me completely. I never hated you, even while you hated me. I could no longer hold back my tears. Every harsh word I had spoken during that live stream echoed through my memory. Yet standing before him, I encountered no bitterness, no resentment, and no desire for revenge. I encountered mercy. Then scenes from my life began unfolding before me, as though I were watching them on an enormous screen. I saw moments I had long forgotten. The day a speeding car narrowly missed me when I was a teenager. The time Omar and I almost boarded a bus that later crashed after we changed our minds at the last minute. The afternoon Yasmin wandered toward a busy road before a stranger stopped her. Even during my darkest months after Omar's death, I saw quiet acts of kindness from neighbors, relatives, and even strangers that I had dismissed at the time. I realized that my life had contained far more grace than I had ever acknowledged. Then I saw something even more painful. I saw my own heart, not physically, but spiritually. It looked like someone sitting alone inside a prison they had built themselves. The walls were made of resentment. The bars were forged from unanswered questions. The chains were bitterness. No one had locked me inside. I had remained there because anger felt safer than hope. Jesus looked at me again and said softly, "Bitterness always promises protection, but it only builds prisons." The words settled deep within me. For the first time since Omar's death, I understood that although I could not change what had happened, I could choose what grief would make me become. Then the light around us seemed to grow even brighter. I sensed our conversation was coming to an end. Jesus looked directly into my eyes. His final words were calm, clear, and unforgettable. Every person will one day stand before truth. Some spend their lives running from it. Others choose to seek it, but truth will meet everyone. Then he extended his hand toward me. It is not your time. Go back. Tell people what anger hides. He paused. And what love can heal. The moment those words were spoken, everything around me disappeared, and I felt myself falling backward into darkness once again. Then, suddenly, I heard urgent voices, felt crushing pain in my chest, and opened my eyes to the bright lights of the hospital ceiling. My journey was not over, but I was no longer the same woman who had entered that emergency room.
The first thing I heard was a steady beeping. Then came unfamiliar voices. She's coming back. Check her pulse again. Doctor, she's opening her eyes. Slowly, I opened my eyes to bright hospital lights shining above me. My body felt heavy, and every breath was painful. For a moment, I didn't understand where I was. Then I saw my mother. She was standing beside my bed, crying uncontrollably. When our eyes met, she covered her mouth and whispered my name. Saeed Bihidimitik. Amina. Within seconds, nurses rushed into the room, followed by doctors who stared at the monitors in disbelief. I later learned that my heart had stopped after the accident, and despite every effort to revive me, they had believed I would never wake up. Some had already begun preparing my family for the worst. Yet there I was, alive. The doctors called it extraordinary. Some called it a miracle. Others simply admitted they could not explain it. But I knew exactly why I had returned. For several days, I told no one about what I had seen. Every time I closed my eyes, I remembered the overwhelming peace of standing in the presence of Jesus. Compared to that place, this world felt so small. I missed the joy of heaven. I missed the love that surrounded me there. Yet I could not forget his final words. Your time has not yet come. Those words echoed through my mind day and night. As my strength slowly returned, I realized I had a choice. I could remain silent because I feared what people would think, or I could tell the truth about what I experienced. It was not an easy decision. I knew many people would question my story. Some would dismiss it as a dream. Others would accuse me of inventing everything for attention. Still others would reject it simply because it challenged what they already believed. For weeks, I wrestled with fear. Then one evening, while reading quietly in my hospital room, I remembered something Jesus had shown me. No act of faithfulness is ever wasted. If he had entrusted me with this message, then my responsibility was not to convince everyone. My responsibility was simply to share it. From that day forward, I began telling my story. Some people listened with tears in their eyes. Others laughed. Some walked away without saying a word. But every now and then, someone would quietly tell me that my testimony had caused them to think seriously about eternity for the first time. That alone reminded me why I had been sent back. People often ask me what the greatest lesson from my experience was. They expect me to describe heaven's beauty, the brilliant light, or the overwhelming peace. Those things were beyond words. But if I could leave only one message, it would be this. Life is far shorter than we imagine. The arguments that consume us, the hatred we carry, the bitterness we refuse to release, and the possessions we spend our lives chasing, will all one day be left behind. What endures is the condition of our hearts, the way we have loved others, and whether we responded to God's invitation with humility and faith. I learned that every person I meet has eternal value. The stranger, the neighbor, even the one I disagree with, each one is someone God loves. That realization changed the way I see the world. Instead of asking who deserves my compassion, I now ask how I can reflect the compassion that was shown to me. Instead of allowing fear to control my life, I choose hope. Instead of returning hatred for hatred, I pray for the strength to forgive. I do not claim to have every answer. I simply know what I experienced. I know that God's mercy is greater than I ever imagined. I know that his call is urgent. And I know that none of us are promised tomorrow. So if you are listening to my story today, I ask you to pause for just a moment. Set aside the noise, the distractions, and the endless debates that fill our lives. Ask yourself honestly, if today were my last day on earth, would I be ready to meet God? Have I sought his truth with sincerity? Have I forgiven those who have hurt me? Have I asked for forgiveness where I have failed others? Have I lived only for this world, or have I prepared my heart for eternity? I cannot answer those questions for you. Only you can. My prayer is that you will not wait until it is too late to seek God with an open heart. Turn toward truth, pursue peace, show mercy, and live each day with the awareness that this life is not the end of the story. Thank you for taking this journey with me and listening to my testimony. Whether you believe every part of it or not, I hope it encourages you to reflect on what truly matters. May you seek truth with humility, love others generously, and never lose sight of the hope that God offers to all who turn to Him.
If you have stayed with me until this point, then I want to leave you with something more valuable than my story. I don't believe I survived simply so people could hear about an extraordinary experience. Experiences fade, emotions fade, even memories become less vivid with time. But truth has a way of remaining long after everything else disappears. If there is one lesson my journey taught me, it is that grief is far more dangerous than most people realize when it is left alone. Grief itself is not the enemy. Every person who has deeply loved someone will one day experience it. The danger begins when grief quietly transforms into bitterness. It rarely happens overnight. It grows little by little, until anger starts feeling more comfortable than hope, resentment feels safer than forgiveness, and pain slowly becomes part of our identity. That is exactly what happened to me. For a long time, I thought I was simply mourning my husband. Looking back now, I understand that I had stopped mourning and started building walls around my heart. Every disappointment became another brick. Every unanswered question became more cement. Every painful memory made those walls higher. I convinced myself those walls were protecting me from being hurt again. In reality, they were imprisoning me. Bitterness never protects the heart. It only isolates it. It changes how we see people. It changes how we hear advice. Eventually, it even changes how we respond to God. That prison is invisible, which makes it even more dangerous, because the person trapped inside often doesn't realize they are no longer free. Because of that, I have learned never to judge another person solely by their worst moment. I know many people watched my live stream and decided they knew exactly who I was. Some called me evil, others called me beyond redemption. I understand why they reacted that way. What I did was deeply offensive and deeply wrong. But if someone had looked beyond my anger, they would have found a grieving widow who had never learned how to process unimaginable loss. Pain does not excuse sinful actions, but hidden pain often explains why people make terrible decisions. The rude cashier you meet at a store, the neighbor who seems constantly angry, the family member who pushes everyone away. Sometimes there is a wound beneath the behavior that no one else can see. That realization has changed the way I look at people forever. I also want to speak honestly about something that our generation often treats as entertainment. Social media has given every one of us a stage. With a single video, we can receive thousands of likes, comments, and shares within hours. That can be a wonderful tool when it is used to encourage, educate, or bring people together. But it can also become a place where outrage is rewarded, where insults spread faster than kindness, and where shocking behavior is celebrated simply because it attracts attention. I know this because I experienced it myself. The night I burned that little Bible, many people applauded me. They encouraged my anger. They celebrated something they believed represented courage. Yet when the cameras stopped recording, not one of those cheering voices came home with me. They did not sit beside me during my sleepless nights. They did not comfort my daughter while she watched me suffer. They did not stand beside my hospital bed. The applause of strangers disappears much faster than the consequences of our choices. If you create content online, or spend a great deal of time on social media, I encourage you to ask yourself a simple question before posting anything. Is this bringing more light into the world, or is it feeding more darkness? Every word we publish has the potential to encourage someone or wound someone. Every joke, every insult, every argument, every video becomes part of the influence we leave behind. I learned far too late that chasing attention is never worth sacrificing compassion. Views and followers may grow quickly, but character is built much more slowly. The greatest surprise of my entire journey was discovering that God's mercy was much greater than my rebellion. If someone had asked me before my experience who deserved mercy, I probably would have pointed to good people, kind people, or religious people. I would never have imagined that mercy could reach someone who publicly mocked Jesus and burned the Bible before thousands of viewers. Yet that is exactly what humbled me. I encountered compassion where I expected condemnation. I found patience where I deserved correction. That realization completely changed the way I understand grace. Mercy is not a reward earned by perfect people. Mercy is a gift offered to broken people willing to receive it. That does not mean our choices have no consequences. They do. I lost friendships. I lost followers. Some family relationships became strained. There are still people who refuse to speak to me because of the path I have chosen. I carry deep regret over the live stream and the pain it caused. Repentance does not erase the past, but it changes the direction of our future. I could not rewrite that night, but I could choose what kind of woman I would become afterward. Every day since then has been another opportunity to walk in humility instead of pride, honesty instead of pretending, and forgiveness instead of bitterness. Forgiveness is one of the hardest lessons I have ever learned. For a long time, I believed forgiving meant saying that what happened to me no longer mattered. I believed forgiving meant pretending my husband's death no longer hurt. That is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is choosing not to let pain control the rest of your life. It is releasing the desire for revenge and trusting God with the things you cannot change. Sometimes forgiveness is a decision you must make repeatedly because the memories continue returning. But every time you choose forgiveness, the chains of bitterness become a little weaker. Humility also became very different to me. Before all this happened, humility sounded like a religious word people used in sermons. Now I understand that humility begins the moment we become willing to admit, I was wrong. Those 4 words can feel incredibly difficult to say, especially after defending ourselves for years. Yet they are often the beginning of healing. Pride keeps us imprisoned because it refuses to acknowledge the truth. Humility opens the door to transformation. Whether you are a Christian, a Muslim, a follower of another religion, or someone who does not believe in God at all, I am not asking you to accept my experience simply because I shared it. I believe every person should sincerely seek truth with honesty rather than fear. Ask difficult questions. Study carefully. Listen respectfully. Do not allow hatred, assumptions, or inherited prejudice to decide what you believe before you have genuinely examined it for yourself. I spent years rejecting something I had never honestly taken the time to understand. Looking back, I regret that deeply. If there is one sentence I hope you remember after hearing my testimony, it is this: never allow pain to become the loudest voice in your life. Pain can teach us compassion, but if we surrender to bitterness, it can also convince us to destroy the very things that might one day help us heal. I nearly allowed grief to define the rest of my life. Instead, I discovered that healing begins when we are willing to let truth reach places that anger has occupied for far too long. People often ask me what became of that little Bible. The truth is that it turned to ashes in my hands, but its message did not. I never imagined that the Bible I burned would become the book that would completely change my life. The pages I tried to destroy became the words I now read with humility. The name I once mocked became the name I now speak with gratitude. Looking back, I understand that I could burn paper, but I could not burn truth. If my story has touched your heart in any way, then before you leave this video, I want to ask you to do something that has nothing to do with me. Take a quiet moment today and examine your own heart. Is there someone you need to forgive? Is there grief you have been carrying alone? Is there anger that has quietly become part of your identity? Is there a truth you have refused to consider because of fear, pride, or past pain? Wherever you find yourself today, choose compassion over bitterness, humility over pride, and an honest search for truth over hatred. You may discover, as I did, that the greatest miracle is not simply surviving death. It is allowing your heart to be made new while you are still alive.